So if you're a regular follower on this channel, you'll know that this is now a new toy to play with, which is the ROLAND TR-08 drum machine. And as I've been promising for a couple of months now, we are going to do the drum pattern from Voodoo Ray by a guy called Gerald. And hopefully as we go along programming this pattern, you'll get to understand how the drum track and sequence is laid out into sort of part 1 and part 2, and how that you can have basic variations of those drum patterns, and you can add intros or fill-ins. It sounds complicated at first, but as we go through it step by step, it will become pretty simple to get your head round. It was a little bit more difficult for me to get my head round, but it will make sense. So at first, if we hold down number 1 on the unit and then switch it on, this should give us the version, or the firmware version, which I believe as of June 2020 1.07 is the most updated version. So I'm gonna again switch the unit off, and then if I hold down number 2 and switch the unit on, this gives me the opportunity to do a factory reset, just so that we start from the ground up. You know, you might have just purchased this unit and you want to have a play with it and restore it back to factory settings so you can start from fresh. So I've just hit tap and the lights are going across the sequence. Once that's done, it obviously tells you that it's done, and we can power cycle the unit. So now if we switch the unit on, we can start to have a little play with it. So once this loads up, I've actually got the selector in the first part, but for this it doesn't really matter. So let's have a look at the built-in pattern on pattern number 1. And just make sure you've got all your levels up so you can hear all the instruments. Now this one's a bit weird because it's got no bass drum on it, but that doesn't really matter. So to me personally, this unit is a little bit low in gain. So what we can do is, if we press menu here and then we go to gain, we can select each of the instruments. So we've got bass drum, let's just crank that up, and then snare drum, crank that up, low tom. Obviously you can do this to suit your own setup, but if we get everything up to 200%, then we've always got the levels on the front of the unit here to mess about with the gain as we're playing the unit. So we want to have the output of each instrument as loud as possible, and then if it's too loud, we can also turn it down at the volume control at the back, the rear of the unit. So those are all now on 200%. So let's just press menu again to get out of there, and I'm just going to carefully turn it down at the back because I want to avoid that. Okay, let me just check the there we go, that's fine. I was just checking my SH101 that I've got connected still is at the right volume. So that's done in terms of the gains on each instrument, and then we'll have a look how the parts of each pattern work. So just be careful with the gain controls and the volume level at the back of the unit, only because the way I've got it set up with my mixer, it's not too loud. Obviously I don't want you to go and split or perforate an eardrum there, so just be mindful of that. What I'm also going to do quickly is just change the clock sync. So if we press menu and use the fine tune knob to go to sync, press tap, and then we want this internal and press tap. I just had it set on auto because I've got another external sequencer programming this, so that is job done. And then if we come out of menu, we now have a tempo that we can adjust. So on each bank we can have patterns 1 to 12. Not only that, is on each pattern slot we can also have a variation A and a variation B, so that sort of gives us 2 bars to a slot. And as well as having 2 bars to a slot, we can have a first part and a second part to each measure or each bar. So the best time to use part 1 and part 2 to create a bar is when you want to increase the resolution or the amount of steps per beat for things like doing closed hi-hat rolls that you get in grime or trap genre of music, but that is for another video. So for the Voodoo Ray drum pattern, we are just going to use on basic variation A part 1, and on variation B we're just going to use part 1. So what we want to do is check that part 1 is set to 16, which it is, and part 2, and it should be by default, should be set to 0. So to get a 0, just press the tap button, and then let's just go to variation B. Part 1 should by default be set as 16, and part 2 by default, and also because we set variation A part 2 at 0, this should also be 0. So this means that the Voodoo Ray, which is a 2-bar pattern, if we have it on basic variation A and B, it will repeat alternatively A and B, A and B. And again, the other thing to bear in mind is if you did utilize part 1 and part 2 to make 2 separate kind of bars, it will start to get a bit complicated when you come to add use the auto fill, because the unique classes part what would be bar 1 and bar 2 as the same bar, it will mess up the timing of the auto fills. So let's just clear this pattern just in case. So if we go bring the pattern right down to pattern clear, and we're on bank 01 and slot 1, just press clear, and obviously we've got a blank slot. Now before we start, again, just make sure that for this we're on pre-scale number 3, so pop it into pre-scale number 3 and press the pre-scale set button, and that means now that every 4 bars is a beat, which is what we want for this genre of music, like that 4 to the floor or 4/4 timing. So now that we've got a few technicalities out of the way, let's get to the fun part and let's start programming this drum pattern. So we're on pattern clear at the moment. We're only going to be focusing on part 1, and let's have it on basic variation A. Make sure on the instrument select that we have it on the bass drum, hit start, and then we have 1, 5, 9 and 13, and we may as well flip over to part B, which is also 1, 5. Now you've got to be careful here that you're on, it's staying on B, 1, 5, 9 and 13, so a pretty standard 4 to the floor on the bass drum. Now while we are on the subject of the bass drum, let's just add a bit of compression to that just to bring out the dynamics. So if you press the menu button and use the value to get to comp, which we're already on, or compression, press number 2, which is the bass drum, and then we will turn this up to about 70 just to make it a bit more punchy, and there we are, away we go. So with the snare drum, let's just put it, obviously press menu to get out of the compression settings, and then go to snare drum, and then we want to flip it to part A, get it running, and the snare drum is pretty simple. It's on 5 and 13 for A, and then 5 and 13 for part B. And again, press menu, and on the compression, let's just add a bit of compression on the snare drum. Let's go for about 70 as well, we can always adjust it. Okay, so that's the snare drum done, and then just press menu to get out of the compression settings. Now for the low tom on part A, it is on, let me just check, 13 and 15, so 13 and 15, and on part B there is no low tom on part B, so let's just stop that and flip it back over to part A. Obviously you can program this a lot quicker yourself. And for the medium tom on part 1, it is going to be on 2, 5, on 2 and 5, so let's put that in, 2 and 5. And then the high tom, the medium tom, go back down to the medium tom on part B, let's just stop that for a second, is on 2 and 5 again. So get it running, and then 2 and 5. So for the high tom on part A, get it running, this is now on 8, 9, 12 and 15, and that sounds right. And the high tom on part B is on 8, 9, 12 and 15 again, so 8, 9, 12 and 15. That sounds right. Let's just stop that and put it onto part A. So then we have the rim shot, and on part A it's on 4, 8 and 15. So select rim shot on part A, 4, 8 and 15, and then on part B it's on 4, 9 and 14. So 4, 9 and 13 this time. Does that sound right? No, sorry, it's on 14 of the of part B. And then the next instrument that we move to is the open hi-hat. So on part A it's on 7 and 11. So 7 and 11. Okay, and then on part B it's not on part B, so we don't need to worry about that. And then the closed hi-hats is on part A. We're on every step except for 4 and 11. Okay, and then on part B it's on every step except 11, so let's work back from 11. And then obviously if we want it to play both A and B alternatively, just put it on A, B variation. And it's probably a little bit fast, so as with the other videos that cover the acid line and the SH101 line, let's have it at 120. And then again it's just a case of adjusting the tuning until it sounds right to you. And that's job done. So now if you want to go one step further and add an intro or a fill, what we'll do is we'll select intro fill number 1, and then because we're going to put in fills first, I always have B as my fill because it's intro A, B for fill-ins. It doesn't really make any difference where you have them, it's just easier for me to remember that my fill-ins are always on B. So we're only going to have one part to a fill. So part 1 is selected and it's 16 steps long. Part 2, let's just check, is 0 steps long because we just want a 1 bar fill there. So on part 1 we are obviously just make sure it's blank. If it isn't blank, put it to pattern clear, press clear, and then away we go. And obviously let's just check. Yeah, phew, we haven't lost the Voodoo Ray, so we're good to go. So for the fill, let's just use the closed hi-hats. Whoops, just remember to go back to the fill, schoolboy error, and make sure we're on part 1. So run it, and then the hi-hats, let's use the ones from bar 1. So let's do everything except 4 and 11. And let's use the rim shot, because when you listen to the original track, that's kind of what's going on. Obviously everybody interprets it different, and that's the fun of music, is that you can make it the way you want. If it sounds right to you, then it is right. And the rim shots on 4, 8 and 15, so 4, 8 and 15. I just check that, 4, 8 and 15. So that's our fill. So if we stop that, and now if we go to manual play, and obviously it goes to slot 1, and obviously we're still on bank 1, nothing's changed there, and we're using intro and fill 13. So I programmed the fill on B. So if we have our basic variation A and B, it will play. If we also have the fill set as manual, it will play. It will just play backwards and forwards like this, and then you can bring in the acid line and stuff like that from the other videos that I have on my channel. However, if you want a fill, we can do it manually because it's set to manual, and obviously make sure you've got it on B for fills, and we program the fill on 13. So let's get this in. Next one. There we go, that kind of makes sense. Let's just do it again. So the fill is always sort of taken over from variation B on the certain bars. So that kind of makes sense with the timing. Now if we wanted the fill to come in on every second bar, so 2 really means second, we won't get variation B on the standard bars because it will always play first bar as A and second bar as the fill, like this. So that could be useful in circumstances, but not here. But if we have it as every 4th bar, it will play A, B, A, fill, which makes more sense. So if we do this, and then this should be our fill, and obviously that kind of making the hair stand up on the back of your neck because we're starting to put a song together. And then again, if you want it on every 8th bar, it will play A, B, A, B, loose count now, A, B, A, and then hopefully the fill. There we go, and it's sort of off on autopilot, and you can go and enjoy and add other things into the song. So I think you've got the gist of putting the Voodoo Ray drum track together, but let's take it one step further and let's have an intro. So if we go to the first part of pattern right and make sure we've got it on 13, let's now flip it over to variation A of which to me personally would be the intro, and let's just make sure that part 1 is 16, which it is, and part 2 is 0. So let's just see what we have. Okay, it's sort of like a dancehall fill, but let's just clear that. So if we hit clear, let's just put it to pattern clear and press clear, and that's job done. So if we go back to part 1, let's have the intro as all the toms. So if we go to low tom, and this is only let's use the first, but actually, yeah, let's use the first bar. So the low toms are on 13 and 15. So 13, 13 and 15. The medium toms are on 2, 5, 2 and 5. And the high toms are on, let's just make sure we've got high toms selected, 8, 9, 12 and 15. So 8, 9, 12 and 15. And then if we are using this as an intro, just to get the time in, even though you'd probably have this sequenced up with a clock, let's just add the closed hi-hats as a bit of a beat so we can keep time of it. So if you wanted to add this into your performance, if you go to manual play, obviously I've now set the dial for the auto fill in as manual, and we've got it set on 13 and variation A, which is the intro that we've programmed for this pattern. If I press tap first before I press play, it will give me a 4-bar intro, and then if I set this to B and put it on every 4th bar, this should be the fill. There we go. Again, if I stop it and then I want the intro to be a bit longer, the only way, unless I write a track, is to have it on A13 and then press tap. Next one I want is the intro, next one I want is the intro, next one I want is the intro, and then I just quickly flipped it to manual because I nearly made a mistake there, and that'll play away happily. And then I want to bring in the fill. Forgot to put it to B, but I'm sort of digressing, but you can see how you can quickly put a performance together just by stringing a few patterns and intros and fills together. So I think we've covered everything to get you up and running with the Voodoo Ray drum pattern, and I'll leave it there. In the obviously next videos in this series, we'll look at the pre-scale and all the different options behind the scenes in the menu, and how to program a track together, add shuffle, adjust the tempo and all that kind of stuff. But again, thank you for watching. If you haven't already subscribed and you want to keep in touch with the videos that will be coming in the near future, please do so. Hit the like button and I'll see you next time.